Welcome to the Bobby O Show. My name is Bob O'Poxner, and I have a fun show today involving college basketball. Plus, I have two guests today. I have Matt Knowling, a recent Yale graduate who played for 4 years of basketball at Yale. And I have Richard Kent, a friend of mine for years, who is an author, sports writer, you name it, Richard's ace. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Matt, you're a Connecticut resident from East Catholic High School. You were the Connecticut Player of the Year when you were a senior in high school. I believe your high school team won 2 championships statewide. I always question why the Catholic schools are part of the whole system. That's another story. They get to recruit a little bit. You know what I'm talking about, and I'm kidding about that. You also was first team All-Ivy, unanimous pick his junior year in college. He has a lot of accolades, which I'll throw in during the course of the show. But I'm really pleased to have you on the show, Matt. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Matt has interesting perspective because not only did he play 4 years at Yale and graduated from Yale as a psychology major, but he also is now playing a 5th year. It's the so-called COVID year, when college basketball players and other athletes as well in college got the last one more year of college. Yale did not play that 1 year, nor did the Ivy. And so he's playing his final year in college basketball at USC. University of Southern California. And so I have a lot of questions to ask with the whole situation. So Matt, how about we talk a little bit about your high school days? You're from Connecticut. Tell us about your background getting to the high school level.
So I grew up in Ellington, Connecticut. It's about 15, 20 minutes outside of Hartford, pretty small town. And I decided to go to East Catholic High School. Ellington wasn't really, what I was looking for basketball-wise or academically. So I was really deciding between going to East Catholic and going to prep school. And East Catholic just felt like the best fit. It was still close to home. It was really good basketball and great academics too.
And when you're in high school, and I went to Shelton High School, Shelton, Connecticut, so I went to a public high school. You have to, if you're getting into school like Yale or USC, you've got to do your homework. You've got to have an academic perspective. What was it that was your influence in your life to be not only an excellent basketball player, but also to be an excellent student?
My parents. I give all the credit to my parents. They set the standard for me growing up. My sister and I. Obviously, sports are great, but school comes first before anything. School and family, and so I give all the credit to my parents for that.
You take a little credit for it too, don't you think, Richard? He gets a little credit for Yale is not an easy school. Having graduated, it's not easy. In fact, we used to say when I was in college, Harvard was a safe school. I don't know if you guys still say that anymore. But,
yeah.
Richard, talk to me a little bit about your first meeting of Matt Knowling. Did he play in the JCC Classic?
You did, didn't you, Matt?
I was supposed to, I think.
That's right. That's right. But did we not have it? Because
I think got canceled. COVID.
Yeah, it got canceled because of COVID. No, but I saw Matt. Lanny Bowles and I went to look at kids in high school. So I saw Matt play in high school, and I went to an early Yale practice late October of his freshman year, and that's the first time I really watched him. And I couldn't believe how deft his touch was and how his post moves, his footwork, and his vision. It just, for a 18-year-old freshman, I assume, it just blew me away, and he only got better at all those aspects.
Well, when I said, by the way, for the audience, the JCC Classic, Richard has for many years been either the head of or heavily involved in the Jewish Community Center of Bridgeport, and they have an annual basketball tournament, which they have, I guess, the best players from Connecticut, theoretically, and the best players from New Jersey playing in a Classic, and Richard's been doing that for many, many years. Is that still going on, Richard?
It's still going on. We actually had Donovan Clingan play 2 years ago, and obviously he was a lottery pick in the NBA draft, and I think he's going to be a superstar in the NBA.
Did you ever play against Donovan, Matt?
I did. Yes, I did.
High school or how?
In high school, yeah. It was my senior year, his sophomore year. He actually scored his 1,000th point against us.
Well, Matt and I, and you also, Bob, know that he's would never play against him in college because UConn would always duck Yale.
I was just going to mention that. When I was a kid, Matt, and Richard and I are about the same age. He's a little bit older than I am. Teenage TV in New Haven, Channel 8 used to have a lot of basketball games in the old Yankee Conference. And the UConn-Yale rivalry was a big rivalry. In fact, I did a show recently with Jim Morgan, who played at Yale many, many years ago in the late 60s, early 70s. And he talked about the fact that he was 2-2 his classes against UConn. What do you think it is about UConn that they don't have the courage, the chutzpah?
I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea. I think it would be great for the state. I think, there's people from Connecticut on UConn's roster and on Yale's roster. I think it'd be really great for Connecticut.
So let me try to answer it, Bob. I asked an assistant coach at UConn, and he said we play 5 really tough power conference teams out of conference. We play some really easy games, and we don't play what we call 70-30 games. A 70-30 game is a game that you could lose 30% of the time, but perception-wise, it doesn't look good. And I know how good Yale basketball is. You know how good Yale basketball is, and Matt does. But the average UConn fan, even in Hartford or Farmington or whatever, has no idea. And they're going to say, what the heck? We just lost to Yale.
Richard, I think I'm correct. Am I right that in this year's NCAA tournament, if something had happened differently, it was likely that UConn and Yale might have played in the tournament instead of Yale playing Auburn? Am I right about that, Richard?
No. If Yale had beaten San Diego State, they're playing UConn in Boston.
TD Garden.
That would have been really cool. And Matt, I understand you have some connections with one of your friends is a UConn connection. My sister, by the way, is a UConn graduate. In 1999, when UConn beat what I think is Duke's best team, they called me for 2 hours that night, rubbing it in. They still to this day rub it in. You have a connection with UConn, don't you?
I do, yes. One of my best friends, Andrew, I went to high school with him for 2 years, played 2 years with him at East Catholic, and, Andrew Hurley, the great.
I saw Andrew Hurley's dad, who's the coach of UConn, play against Bobby Hurley, his uncle, in Philadelphia in the same weekend when Duke beat Kentucky. Duke had to also play in that tournament on the Thursday night game, Bobby Hurley against Danny Hurley. Danny's the younger brother, Bobby's the older brother. And that might be the best game Danny Hurley ever played because he outplayed his brother Bobby. You ever talk about that with you guys?
No, I don't. Not a lot. But I know there's some interesting stories, some funny stories for sure.
So, Bob, can I interject? Because that raises a question that I'd like to ask Matt. Matt, I saw you at a UConn game. I know you've been a UConn fan. When you thought that you're going to do a 5th year, did UConn enter your mind, and did you talk to Andrew or his dad about it at all?
Yeah, it definitely was in my mind a little bit. Going to I grew up a UConn fan, like you said, so it was like my dream school. But it would have been the right situation. Part of me was ready to get out of Connecticut, honestly. Grew up there, went to college there. I had the opportunity to come to USC, which is just a big change in this 1 year. So I thought this opportunity to come out to California was too good to pass up on, just for this 1 year. So UConn would have been really cool and, my dream school for sure. But I think it all worked out how it was supposed to.
How about if Danny says to you, you're going to be a rotation player, you're going to play 15 to 20 minutes a game?
Yeah, it's something to consider, but
I could do that. I'm going to turn it and say, objection, Your Honor.
Yeah.
You can answer if you want. You don't have to answer that question.
No, yeah, I'm really happy with my decision where I'm at. I think I'll be able to develop into a professional here. I'm in the right situation, right people around me. So I'm happy with my decision. Matt,
it's funny. When I was in college, the only regret I have about college and law school is that I didn't take a semester out of Yale just to get a different experience, because I was a Shelton kid and I was Connecticut all my life, except for when I went to Duke. And in those days, it wasn't as big a deal. But the place I wanted to go was either UCLA or USC. I thought it'd be fun to do that. Yeah. But, I didn't have it just wasn't what we did in my generation. Right. I want to talk to you about your deft touch. That's what Richard was talking about. I when I go to the Yale games, I usually get a seat three rows behind where your bench is. You wouldn't know who I am, but I'd be 3 rows behind. I'd be looking over Coach Jones' shoulder trying to see what he's writing out, whatever. But that's where I was sitting when Yale beat Cornell this year at home, and Cornell was a very good team. And you hit a shot at the buzzer, very similar to the Brown shot. We'll get to that in a moment. And I was right there. And do you remember? I'm sure you remember that play. What's that play? What's that play all about?
Yeah, so basically the play wasn't really for me, honestly. Yeah, we were trying to get a three to the corner. So I was setting the screen and just rolled back to the ball. They kind of messed up their switch a little bit, and Bez hit me, and I had a little angle. I don't know how far it was. It was pretty far, but I banked it in. Yeah,
I would guess 4 or 5 feet, which for me, and I'm not nearly the ballpark you are, obviously. I think the hardest shot in basketball is the 3 or 4 foot shot to the left or the right of the hoop. But that's something that you're very good at. And in fact, almost identical play happened against Brown to win the Ivy League championship. In fact, I said to Coach Jones, he was on the show a little bit ago, I said, Coach, that was the exact same play as Matt Knowling did against Cornell. He said, a little different. But you'd say that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now tell me about that play. Brown is the big underdog. Yale's in running for the championship for the Ivy League. Yale's behind a lot of the way. Some of the best players, not you, but some of the best players didn't have their best games. But what happened? Yale is down by like 4 or 5 points under a minute, correct?
Yeah. It was 6 with, would you know, Richard?
27 seconds.
27 seconds down 6. Yeah. I just think that game just shows how much we grew as a team, from the beginning of the year. So I'm still so proud of my guys. Like, you think back to, that game in Vermont earlier in the season, we're up 5 with 4 seconds left, and we lose regulation. And so, for the rest of the year, we're harping, play to the end, play hard. You got to play hard every day. Can't cut corners, all that stuff. And I just think that Brown game really, showed all the progress we made throughout the year. Down 6 with 26, 27 seconds left. Like, earlier in the year, we might have given up, thought the game was over. But, we stuck to the game plan. We didn't stop. We kept playing, and we came back, and it was just a crazy moment.
Was that shot for you? Was that shot scheduled for you, or there were 3 passes that happened?
Yeah. No, honestly, it was not. It wasn't drawn up for one specific person. I just kind of decided to go hang out by the basket in a little dunker spot, and my plan behind that was try to get an offensive rebound, try to tap in any misses, just kind of be around the basket, clean anything up. And then Bez drove, and I had my hands ready. I think he saw me the whole way. And I shot that shot, and I shoot that shot every day, practice that shot. So, I was really confident shooting it.
Jonathan, would you please, my director, show the pictures you have? I think one of the pictures maybe after that game, I think. Jonathan, if you can get that on the screen. I don't know if that's you, number 22, correct?
Yeah, that's after the Cornell game. That's the Cornell one.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in that picture. What's this one?
Yeah, and that's after the Brown game, the championship. Yeah.
And you're holding the trophy. That's just
holding
so cool.
Trophy, confetti all over me. That day was a dream. Crazy.
I watched it on TV, and that's just you dunking the ball. Richard, that's a little more than you can jump, right, Richard?
Yeah, a little bit.
It's funny how it's ironic how you mentioned, Matt, about the Vermont game that Yale lost in the last 4 or 5 seconds, and how that kind of game can influence this game. A lot of folks don't know this, but if you know the famous Grant Hill to Leitner shot that won the Kentucky game many minutes, it's only shown every week, virtually in basketball tournament season. Duke ran that exact same play against Wake Forest. I don't know if you know that. About 4 months earlier than that, and the play didn't work.
Wow.
And when Grant Hill threw the pass, it curved out of bounds and went out of bounds. And Grant Hill always said that bad pass situation helped him. So it's interesting how what you do in a regular season game at Cornell at home against Cornell can influence what may happen later on.
Yeah.
The Ivy League does not allow the COVID year. The Ivy League has a lot of rules that both Richard and I have discussed, which I don't agree with. And I would suspect that if you had, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't, if the Ivy League would have let you have the COVID year, or you might have stayed at Yale. You as a player, and I'm sure it's in the locker room, it's discussed a lot about how Yale players in the Ivy League is different than the other schools. What is your thought about how the Ivy League does not allow the COVID year, first of all?
I think it's interesting. It's something that all other conferences are allowing. And I think, some of the rules in the Ivy League and, obviously the NIL aspect of it too, it's different. The Ivy League doesn't allow the same things that's going on at other places. Take for example, I'm out in LA right now. We have summer sessions, so we practice. We have 4 hours a week on the court. That's something you don't get in the Ivy League. So it's just different. And I think being able to experience both, I really appreciate both in different ways.
Do you think the fact that the Ivies do not allow players to transfer in and out as much as you can for other schools, is that going to hurt the Ivy League in the long run, you think, with some of these rules?
I hope not. I really hope not, because Ivy League basketball is really good. And last year we could have had 2-3 teams in the tournament. I think going to an Ivy League school and playing basketball is such a special experience, such a unique experience. So I would hate to see, that get left behind with the way college basketball is going.
I was at the NCAA tournament. I'm sorry, Rich. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, Matt, you say I hope not, but in reality, Danny Wolf leaves Yale to go to Michigan. Malik Mack leaves Harvard to go to Georgetown. Tyler Perkins leaves Penn to go to Villanova. I mean, don't you think that ball is rolling down the hill awfully quick right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone was expecting that to happen last year. Like, transferring out of the Ivy League, like, that's never been a thing. It's never been a thing. And I think that happening last year with those really talented players, I think it's like, I'm sure the Ivy League knows what's going on. So I don't know which direction they're going to take with it, because it sucks to lose players of that caliber, when they could have been playing the Ivy League for 3-4 years. It definitely hurts the Ivy League a bit.
It was great. I was at the NCAA tournament in Providence. I think it was 2016 when Yale won its first NCAA tournament game. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting in some good seats. I had Chris Dudley and a lot of the other older Yale players were there having as much fun as the guys were on the court. I'm not sure if you're aware of that particular game, but that year Yale beat Baylor, and you play on the team that was the second Yale win in the NCAA tournament. Talk to me about the Auburn game, which both Richard and I discussed. We were sort of picked off because we said a lot of other teams we could have matched up well with, but Auburn, we weren't sure. Talk about that game, please, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, we went into that game so confident. We were riding a bit of a high from, the Ivy League championship game, which I think was like 5 days before, so about a week before. So we went in super confident, and then that's how you have to go into those games as an underdog. Like, you got to go, if you go in thinking like, they're bigger, stronger, faster, like, that's already a disadvantage. You got to go in and be like, hey, we're just as good as these guys, and let's just go prove it. And, we thought we were really good. The past, 2 years, we had opportunities to beat high major teams. We're at Kentucky, we're up in the second half. We almost beat Colorado on the road, almost beat Butler on the road, like that. So we've been close, and, we finally, turned the corner, and it was the perfect time to do it. So I just think that our confidence was the biggest thing for that.
Matt, you participated in the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about how does that work? How does one get onto the transfer portal, and how does I'll call it recruiting, take place?
Yeah.
How about your story?
Yeah. So I entered the transfer portal about 3 days after our season ended. So I reached out to our compliance officer and did some paperwork, and then I was just in the portal. And then I guess it's just like a database that coaches can, see your name, see your stats, see your film, and they reach out to you if they're interested, and go from there. You get recruited, plan visits, stuff like that. It's pretty hectic. Times you're getting 5-6 phone calls a day. Other days it's silent. So, it's a mental game too. But, just the way with college basketball is, I'm really glad that I got to, experience it. But I'm also glad I'm out of the portal. It was a little stressful. Now,
there's also the NIL. And I'm not going to ask you to talk about your own personal, whatever you're getting financially for NIL, but how does that work for a player like yourself? Does that come before once you're in the portal, after you're in the portal? When does the NIL stuff start getting into conversations?
Right. So they can kind of talk to you about it in the recruiting process. For me, I never had any direct conversations with coaches about NIL. I have an agent that does that, which is really nice. So for me, that keeps it all just strictly basketball. So each school pretty much, they have a collective, and it's pretty much donors, alumni, and the team can split that up to their players however they'd like. So you go to events throughout the year for the collective, and get paid for those events, which is
players you guys are entitled. I mean, you work hard, you study hard, you play hard. You're entitled to get some of the rewards as well. Although as a fan, it bothers me that There's going to be bidding wars, with Cooper Flagg,
Right.
Duke over UConn, whatever. I don't know what he got financially, but that kind of bothers me. I want to go off basketball for a moment, and that is I've interviewed Yale players over the years, very bright guys like yourself. I want to ask you a question about politics. I don't want to know about your personal politics. Don't want to know about that. But I'll give you an example. Richard and I spoke getting ready for today's show for about 15, 20 minutes today about the elections. I talked to my daughter, who's in her early 30s, about the elections. You're, I assume, 22, 23, 24 years of age, that age.
21, about 22.
Okay, so you're eligible to vote. Can you talk, generally speaking, do you and your friends talk about politics, about the elections? People don't talk about it. It's something that kids have more important things to do. Without telling, again, who you're supporting like that, just generally speaking about the political discussions that happen.
I think in the last few years, I've definitely started paying more attention to politics. And a lot of that is probably because I was at Yale. Just my friends around me and the people around me, just kind of, not having to be like all obsessed with politics, but just having an understanding of what's going on in your country, I feel like is really important. And I think going into college, I didn't really think that. But, going to Yale kind of widened my horizons a bit. And I realized it's important to really have an understanding of what's going on.
Richard and I have very strong feelings, which we won't express now, although I have done some shows about the topic. But I always tell my daughter, and I tell someone like you, that what's going to happen in our country affects you much more than us. And I just hope that you and your friends, and friends and family, whatever, are talking about the important issues. What was the story at Yale, just generally speaking, with the protests that were happening last semester? What was going on at Yale generally?
Yeah, so there was just protests all around campus, camping out around campus. And during graduation, there was a couple of protests. People walked out. It was definitely a very tense time, and very, to be there while all this is going on was very unique. And I think being around it, it's cool. Not cool is probably the wrong word for it, but just to be able to say you were at Yale during a time when this was going on, these protests were going on. I appreciated it.
Well, Matt, let me ask you this. How aware were you during the Dartmouth game at home when the 100 Palestinians walked into the stands behind the Dartmouth bench and stood and chanted for 30 minutes?
Yeah, I had no idea that was going to happen. We kind of saw them come in the beginning of the game, and they were all wearing the same thing. So I didn't really think anything of it, and then they started chanting during the game. We definitely noticed it, but we tried to stay focused. But I had no idea that was going to happen. But honestly, I'm not surprised that something like that happened at a basketball game.
Matt, when I was you mentioned about the protests on campus. We only have about 3 or 4 minutes left in the show, but when I was at Yale in the 74-75, that was my senior year, there was a big uproar on campus involving a very nasty person. I won't use the word I was going to say, but SOB perhaps, William Shockley. And he had, I don't know if you ever heard of William Shockley, but he had a very big, very racist perspective. And our campus was uproar because he was going to come speak there. I think the very conservative group was having him on campus, and the big position was free speech, anti-racism. And he ended up coming, and he was shouted down and never got a chance to speak. But just to give you some history, that has happened on campus. And even in 1969-70, when the Black Panthers had their trial, actually one of my law partners was in the National Guard at that point in time. So it's good, to my opinion, to have Yale students, any college students, to have a chance to express their views and learn what's going on, et cetera, and utilize their free speech. But when it gets to having prohibiting kids from going to class or nasty physical confrontations, that's where we have to draw the line. But it's a hard line to draw. Do you have any further comments about that?
No, I think it's important to express what you believe in. And, we're at a time in this world where, there's some scary things going on. And I think no matter what, I think it's important to just, like I said, just don't be afraid to, speak what you believe in. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yale basketball, 2024-25. What's the season look like for us?
What year?
This coming year, 2024.
Oh, you're gonna have a great year. Bez Mbe is gonna make a huge jump. John Poole Key is gonna make a big jump. Samson Allerton, Nick Townsend, Trevor Mullen. I could keep going. They're all going to have a great year. Experienced, and I'm excited to watch them. I'm glad we don't have to play them. I wish we could, but hey,
What's
really
the final score if you played them on November the 7th?
Hey, don't do that to me. USC 80, Yale.
That's the right answer.
Yeah,
That's
Yale 65, Yale 70.
when my son was playing football at Richfield High School, they had a good team. They had state finals and all that stuff. My old high school, Shelton, was going to play that Richfield if we had both won the game. Shelton didn't. Shelton won and Richfield didn't. My son said, "Dad, if Shelton plays Richfield and I went to Shelton High School graduate, who are you going to root for?" I said, "Shelton. I don't care who you're playing for. It's my home team. You know, you got to do it." Richard, do you have one last question? We have about 2 minutes left.
Yeah, I mean, why do you think it is, Matt, that the quality of play in the Ivy, which at the top, as we know, last year, Yale, Cornell, Princeton, this year, Yale, Princeton, Brown, is so disrespected, not only locally, but nationally as well?
Yeah, I mean, I just think there's a stigma around Ivy League basketball. And we've talked about this before. I just think, people think Ivy League basketball, they think, oh, you're a bunch of just smart dudes. They don't really care about basketball. I just think that's just like, you hear Yale, you hear Princeton, you don't really think about sports. You think about, the school. So I just think if the Ivy League continues to, produce how it's been producing in the past, rank teams in different sports, wins in the NCAA tournament in basketball, I don't think that should be a stigma for too much longer. Because even when I came here, like, people knew like Yale basketball is legit. People respect Yale basketball over here. So I think hopefully that's changing soon.
What's the team for USC looking like for this coming season?
Yeah, we're gonna be really experienced. I think we have like 7 or 8 grad transfers. Guys who average double doubles at other mid majors. So if we can just put it all together, we're gonna be really good. Super versatile, 1 through 5, long, athletic. We're gonna play pretty fast. So it should be fun. I'm excited.
Matt Knowling, Richard Cat, I want to thank both of you gentlemen for coming on the show. I'm always so pleased at the quality of the academics and quality of the articulate nature of our student athletes at Yale, because I have a lot of respect for it. And I appreciate you, Matt. I hadn't met you before. I hope you've enjoyed your experience on this show, and I wish you very much success. I guess for Richard's sake, I'll say, except when you play Rutgers at the Rack. And maybe Richard, would be nice to give you a ticket for that game. In any event, Matt Knowling, Richard Kemp, this has been Bob Potsner. Thank you again on the Bobby O Show. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.